If you're just joining us, I'm speaking with Dr. Sarah Jansen on Your Supernatural Life here on Green 960. For podcasts of the show, go to yoursupernaturallife.com. So, Sarah, let's talk about flame retardants. They're found in conventional mattresses and in our furniture cushions. Should we really be concerned?
Yes, I do think we should be concerned about flame retardants. They're not just in our furniture, but they're in practically everything that we come into contact with in our daily lives. They're in our electronics, our televisions, computers, anything that generates a little bit of heat when you plug it in. They're in our carpeting, especially the foam that's beneath the carpeting, and they're in our cars. And a lot of people spend time in their cars commuting, and that's actually a big source of exposure. Flame retardants are added to things to promote safety, and I think most people assume that they're doing good things for us. But the reality is that they don't stop a fire; they just slow it down, so that if you're in a situation where a fire is occurring, you have a little extra time to get out. But the amount of chemicals that are added are really not preventing fires as much as some other public health measures which have been taken, including things like smoke alarms and sprinklers and fire-safe cigarettes, which have really decreased the number of fires that are happening. So again, we're being exposed to a lot of chemicals that we have emerging, and sometimes a lot of information about their health threats. In the case of flame retardants, some of them have been linked to, again, loss of IQ points, changes in learning and memory and behavior. Others are linked to cancer. And the problem that we've seen with the flame retardants is that as soon as we ban one group of flame retardants, another group crops up to replace them that are equally as concerning for their toxic health threats. So as an example, this group of flame retardants called the polybrominated diphenyl ethers, or PBDEs. Two of the worst of those groups of chemicals were removed voluntarily from furniture, and then several states, including my state of California, banned them. And then the replacement chemical was something, or at least something that has been reported that is the replacement chemical, is something called chlorinated tris. And you might remember in the 1970s when there were recalls and bans of flame retardants in kids' pajamas because they were linked to cancer. And that chemical was chlorinated tris. It's the same chemical that's being put in our couch cushions now.
Wow.
That's happened because it was banned from kids' pajamas, but it wasn't banned from anything else.
So it doesn't make sense though. Like, so who's overseeing all this? How is this being allowed? And what's the solution?
Exactly. It's very confusing, and it's very hard. So in the case of flame retardants, one of the solutions is the way that flammability standards are set. So in California, we have something called a regulation called TB117, and I ask all the readers or listeners, as you're listening to this, and maybe if you're in your home, you can lift up your couch cushion and look at that little tag that says it's not supposed to be removed except by the consumer. And in many cases, it'll read this piece of furniture complies with TB117, and that means that it's been treated with probably quite a bit of flame retardant chemicals to meet this flammability standard that's in California, which is really quite unrealistic to real-world situations of fires, but because of the standard, which doesn't consider at all the effects of the chemicals on health, it just considers whether or not they keep a fire from exploding faster. It doesn't say which chemicals are safe or not. It just says you have to add these chemicals to meet the standards. So if you live outside of California, you can avoid buying furniture that has this label that says it meets the TB117.
Well, let's just go back for a second. So let's say I go into my furniture store, or I go into Macy's, let's say, and I want to buy a couch. Being in California, can I say to the salesperson, when I order this couch, I want it not to have flame retardants? They won't sell it to me, correct?
They won't unless they say something like you have to show up with a note from your doctor. Because it is a law in California that the furniture sold here meets this standard. So you can buy furniture that's less likely to have the chemicals because of the materials that it's made with. But really, what we need is policy changes that will make it so that you don't have to have an advanced degree in chemistry to figure out what things, what furniture to buy and what computers to buy and all those sorts of things.
Right.
There are furniture makers who have pledged to use the safest flame retardants that they can find, but again, this requires quite a bit of research on the part of the consumer to try to figure these things out. So what we tell people in terms of ways of avoiding exposure is the way that most of us get exposed to the flame retardants in our furniture or in our and attached to dust particles, and then we either inhale the dust or ingest it. So when you're cleaning, instead of using like a feather duster or a dry rag that will just kick up the dust and circulate it in the air, you should use something that's damp and that will, the dust particles will adhere to it rather than coming up into the air.
Okay, but I don't want our listeners to then go out and buy Pledge or something like that, which has other chemicals in it. So
No.
Yeah.
just plain water.
Right.
Just plain water on a rag is enough to do that. Or those micro fiber cloths that have the electrostatic charge that attract the dust particles is another way of doing it. And when you vacuum, make sure your vacuum cleaner has a HEPA filter, which is clean, so that it will collect the dust particles and, again, not kick them up and circulate them in the air.
Okay, I'm speaking with Dr. Sarah Jansen on Your Supernatural Life here on Green 960. And if you want more information about Sarah's work, she has a website called Takeout Tox. Is it Takeout Toxics or Takeout Toxins?
Toxics.
Toxics.org. And you can also reach Sarah at sjanssen, JNSSEN, at nrdc.org. We have a couple minutes left. I just wanted to talk a little bit about silver nanoparticles used in cosmetics and skin cream and sunscreen. Do you have an opinion about that?
I haven't done a lot of that work myself. My colleague here at NRDC, Jennifer Sass, has. I do know that it's promoted as another antibacterial chemical in things like clothing and for a preservative in things like cosmetics. The problem with nanoparticles is that they're so small they can be absorbed across the skin and make their way into your blood. And again, it's a problem of we don't know what the long-term health impacts are of these exposures, and really speaks to the fact that for almost everything that is in your consumer products, whatever chemical it may be, most of them haven't been tested for long-term health impacts, their effects on fertility, reproduction, development of the brain, cancer effects. For most things, the federal agencies really don't know whether these chemicals are harmful or not. And so the consumer can't be assured that just because it's on a store shelf that somebody has vetted it to make sure it's safe.
Right.
And that's what our Takeout Toxics website is really about. Which is calling for reform of the federal law, which regulates how these sorts of things end up in our consumer products in the first place.
So is there something happening right now with federal chemical policy reform?
There sure is. There's been so the law is called the Toxic Substances Control Act. It was one of the major environmental laws that was passed in the 1970s along with the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act. But unlike those laws, which have been updated and reformed to be consistent with modern science and modern life, the Toxic Substances Control Act has never been reformed or updated. So it's a very weak and outdated law, and there's been legislation introduced in both the Senate and the House to reform it, and you can find more information about that on our website, which is takeouttoxics.org.
Okay, that's fantastic. And just briefly, you as a mom, what are you doing to help your daughter stay healthy, for example? What types of things are you doing at home?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's really hard. I try to stay away from buying a lot of plastic, whether it's plastic toys or especially things for the bathtub. She's a little bit older now, so she's not putting things in her mouth as much, but now she's into girly things, nail polish and jewelry. And so I worry about the heavy metals that are in costume jewelry and often result in recalls, and also the chemicals that are in cosmetics. So I do use the Skin Deep database for cosmetics to learn about which cosmetics are safe and personal care products. I do try to avoid using plastic things as much as possible, staying more towards the wooden toys and products. But I think, you also have to to be realistic and know that you can't buy everything wooden for your kid. So when we do buy something that's plastic or metal, I try to make sure that I supervise her when she's playing with it so that she's not putting it in her mouth.
Right. Well, thanks for that great advice.